anecdotes that he told me as a child, one of which was his seeing Hitler march in triumph into Vienna and the fanatical welcome that the Austrians extended. And the second was a more personal story about his saving his friends, the Rosenbergs, on Kristallnacht, which was the night of broken glass. So after my father passed away, having been trained as a journalist, I wrote his obituary. And in trying to make it more than a chronology of his various postings, I put in one sentence about his close encounter with the Gestapo and his giving a visa to the Rosenbergs. Shortly thereafter, it was just by chance, I was asked what more I knew about my father's issuing visas to Jews, and I said I didn't. So he asked me he said, well, don't you want to know? And that somehow propelled me into essentially a 15-year odyssey to try to uncover the history of my father's humanitarian efforts in Vienna and the extent of it, which I found out was not just, Mr. Rosenberg, but ended up numbering in the thousands. His action not only helped the Jews of Austria to escape, but also the Jews in other Nazi-occupied territories who heard through the grapevine as a result of my father's actions about Shanghai as a refuge of last resort. And therefore, in 1938 and 1939, some 18,000 European Jewish refugees were able to escape to Shanghai, although I believe that the majority of the visa recipients from my father's consulate in Vienna were able to escape elsewhere. I began this search 2 months after my father passed away. It was, I think, as a daughter, a way of hanging on a little longer. Basically, I felt like it was, looking for a pebble in an ocean. It was 60 years later. There was no Schindler's List. The visa recipients were scattered to the four winds. But I think through luck and sheer perseverance, I was able to actually find some of the original visa recipients. The survivors that I found during my search submitted their testimonials to the Israeli government. Now, the Israelis had established a Holocaust Remembrance Authority, and the place is called Yad Vashem, which in Hebrew means the place of names. They investigated, and in the year 2000, they recognized my father as what they call a righteous among the nations. My father's deeds became known through the publicity that this generated. I was able to speak to Jewish communities in different places and also to Chinese communities. The U.S. government wanted to honor my father and therefore asked if I would put together a photo exhibit, and that exhibit was shown in June at the Historical Society. It's become more than just a daughter recording the story of her father. If nothing else, the story of my father is about what a single individual, a human being, can do to fulfill his potential, which is to be human in the face of enormous evil and enormous calamity.
So now we're continuing as we leave Europe. We wanted to start with a story about people escaping. My parents, Heinz Frankenstein and Inge Kaufmann, were born in Germany and escaped to Shanghai. They met in Shanghai, married at the Ohel Moshe Synagogue, and lived on Wayside Road. And this is the temple you've been hearing about. My father was an apprentice baker in Germany. The Nazis would not allow him to continue his training. And after Kristallnacht, he traveled with his parents and his sister to Shanghai. Here is just a small segment of his oral history.
When she came home, he had to Gestapo to tell them you're leaving. So I didn't have to go. My father went to the Gestapo, which was 3 blocks from our home, and told them that we're leaving and going to China. So my father came back and he said, you know, the man shook hands with me, wished me luck.
Now, will you please give a warm welcome to Mrs. Helga Silverberg.
Welcome everybody, my name is Helga Silverberg. I was born in Germany, left Germany in 1939, April, with my parents, going to Shanghai, and spent the next 8 years there. The thing here says to go with my vivid memories of Shanghai. All 8 years of vivid memories. There were very good ones, there were some not so good ones. But memories like going to school and having dead little wrapped up bodies on the sidewalk was an everyday occurrence. There was the bombing of the Jewish ghetto, where about 30 of our people lost their lives. But there were nice times when we had a Mother's Day celebration in camp with all the children acting up. And there was the highlight that was our school. A school that is not being mentioned a whole lot, but it was the backbone of all of my generation. There is the education we got. That's, I personally, all the schooling I ever had. And it was thanks to the people that were mentioned in the previously. They were Baghdadi Jews. And the one in our school who built it was Mr. Horace Kaduri. These windows are in his honor. They were donated to B'nai Emunah in 1980 when we had the first Shanghai reunion. The other part is to say how I feel about Shanghai, how I think about it now. It was the education of a lifetime. And what was most marvelous about it is the way the Chinese welcomed us. We came with thousands of people into an area where the people were poor. They did not have anything. They let us live there. I really don't think that any Jew was ever harmed by a Chinese. Never. We were living amongst them. They learned German, we didn't learn Chinese. But that was because we were amongst our own people just trying to talk German still, but told not to in school where we were supposed to talk English. So that's kind of, I don't want to take more time, but that are my feelings about Shanghai. And it did form my whole life. Thank you.
Now, please welcome Ms. Heather Klein and her father, Mr. Jeffrey Klein.
It was a little over 6 years ago, and I wish I could tell you what spirit moved me to put my mother's maiden name, as it was originally spelled, into a computer search engine in the middle of my workday. But I did. And I was flabbergasted to see Up at Pop with a story about looking for love posted on the Angel Island Immigration Station website. Story written about my mother, telling me some details of her detention at Angel Island that I certainly had not been aware of, and suggesting some details of her transition from China to Angel Island and ultimately into the United States that my mother had never spoken to me about. The result was an email back to the Angel Island folks saying, guess what? I'm Rosa Ginsburg's son. And if you want to know the rest of the story, I'd be happy to share it with you. The result was that a few months later we met at their offices in the Bay Area, and I brought papers from my mother, her passports, and a number of other documents, and my wife and my daughter Heather and I spent an amazing half a day reading through her papers, her interrogations, finding out about what some of the things in those papers really meant, and trying to piece together also the history of my mother's sister, who was in Shanghai, and her husband, my grandmother, and my grandfather, all of whom are in Shanghai. My mother subsequently, a teenager, ended up on a ship heading here to San Francisco, and not having funds and not having proper papers, was promptly interrogated at Angel Island, and ultimately was admitted to the United States. That saga of resilience, that saga of fortitude, and that story is as meaningful today as it was when my mother came here. But in some respects, even more meaningful for me was the fact that our daughter Heather chose to take it up, to research what we didn't know, to find out more about Shanghai, about my parents' transition and escape from Vienna, and ultimately her entry into the United States. And was so motivated by her grandmother's story that she came to write a one-act musical piece to describe that experience and tell that story. I also have no words to tell you what it is like as a father to watch your daughter play your teenage mother and channel her and sit there and have that experience over and over again. So it is a great pleasure that I introduce my daughter Heather and accompanist Josh to share a little bit of that story with you today.
So, as my father said, to come back here, that was quite emotional. So it was an amazing day when we found out my grandmother's story. I had never known that she was in Shanghai, and I did not know that she was detained at Angel Island. And being an artist, I see things through the lens of wanting to create something that is always remembered. And her story struck me so hard that I needed to write about it. Being a novice composer, I took a hand and made this show. So we start with I'm stuck, where I'm detained at Angel Island, where she was. Half of the show is original interrogation from her time there, and half the show is me guessing what this experience was like for her, and seeing it through my lens and what I know of my grandmother. I'm stuck, they've detained me, and they won't let me leave. I'm here at Angel Island, God knows when I'll be free. Until I show that my cousins in the East will send money, train money for me. I'm stuck. more than I thought. I was queasy, exhausted, now 250's all I've got. Ay, ay, ay. I'm stuck, they detain me, and they will question me. I'm here at Angel Island, is there hope for me? Officers will question every detail of my life, but please, oh please, don't bother sending money. I'll be fine. I'm stuck, they detain me, and they will question me. I'm here at Angel Island. Just say a prayer for me. But don't worry, Herbie, your girl's got a plan. But for now, just know I'm stuck. So my grandmother was very stubborn, like me, and fiery. And it was hard to imagine what it could have been like for her at 18 years old, with $250 in her pocket, trying to make it with nobody else to get to America, while her father was very sick, trying to get them out of China and into the United States. She was brave, the way I've never had to be brave, thank God. But she did. And she took that risk, and she made it through. But when I thought of her time in Shanghai, I imagined there was no place where she could just be herself, no space, no place where she could just go and be on her own. She worked in Shanghai, she worked in a curious shop. And so in this song, Dear Nickel, Mir Nickel, Me a Nickel, You a Nickel, Ich beg for mein Heim so far away. I long for my home so far away. Dear Nickel, oi, mir Nickel, oi, ich beg for mein Heim so far away. Oi, dear Nickel, oi, mir Nickel, oi, we are so far from yesterday. But here in this cafe, I have a chair, I have a name. Oi, 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 here in this cafe, I am me again. And thank God I can be here again. Hi, dear Nickel, oi, dear Nickel, oi, who will survive just one more day? Oi, dear Nickel, oi, dear Nickel, we all are here in this decay. But here on these streets, all eyes are waiting, all mouths are hungry. Here on these dirty streets, I long for home again. And God, I pray, when will that be again? Dear Nickel, oi, dear Nickel, who will survive just one more day? Oi, dear Nickel, give me the strength, a nickel. I may lose myself, a nickel, but here in this cafe, God knows this isn't me, a nickel. Forgive my prayer, a nickel. Give me some hope for one more day. The last thing I want to sing for you is a song called Flowery Flag. There was a poem written on the bunks at Angel Island, and the Chinese called the American flag flowery flag. And when I read this poem, to me, I thought it was a symbol for hope, a feeling of going back home, someplace that felt familiar, someplace that they could find freedom and a new beginning. And I think this is what my grandmother finally found when she entered into the United States through that flowery flag. Talk about going to the land of the flowery flag, that flowery flag. There were words of farewell to the parents, many feelings, many tears, face to face with the flowery flag, that flowery flag. Do not forget the day when you came ashore. Do not forget, do not forget. Flowery flag, that flowery flag. There were words harsh as tigers, a taste of it all, leading me back, leading me back. Not without work, landing on this island, I am still trapped alone with my thoughts on this lonely island, on this lonely island. When I finally land in the land of the flowery flag.
Thank you so much, Heather, Father, and your company. Now please welcome Mr. Gunta Rushka. Please come on up.